Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our Made in Hackney and Global Plant Kitchens webinar on cooking for your community. So, my name is Sareta Puri, and I am a chef, mentor, teacher, and sort of all-round person that works for Made in Hackney. And I've been working on the Global Plant Kitchens program since we started it, I think 3 years ago. And it's been a really great project to work on and to support so many organisations to start their own community kitchen or cookery school. And one of the things that we've learned is that depending on where people are, be it in the UK, France, Peru, South America, South Africa, everyone has a different need and a different purpose. And that's really why we wanted to share in this session about how to cook for your community. So if you're not familiar with Made in Hackney, we are the UK's first, therefore oldest, vegan community cookery school. We were established, I think, in 2012, so 13 years. So Made in Hackney's been around for 13 years. And our main activity is cookery classes in the community. We have our own school in North London, and we also run a meal batch cooking service called Community Made, which has evolved since 2020. And around that, we also do a lot of consultancy, training, support, and events, including Global Plant Kitchens. So, what is a community kitchen? I'm hoping that you are here or watching this because you have an idea of what a community kitchen is. And the main thing that we want to let you know is that you don't have to do it the same as Made in Hackney. The way that we've done it, we've set that out in our materials on globalplantkitchens.org. And that's really there as a bit of advice and a bit of guidance for you. But a community kitchen can be so many different things. We've outlined the four main aspects that we see. And it might be that you do a bit of these, or it might be that you focus solely on one. And I'll go through these in the next few slides. But what I would say up front is that the two sort of things that are vital across any type of community kitchen is understanding your community. Why are you doing what you want to do? You might have a personal quest to get more plants on more people's plates. Great, but what does your community need and why? And I think that's where some people just go in with a really strong idea, but they haven't made sure that's what their community, they might not want it, but they might need it. You know, there might be area where there's high health inequalities, and you know that more plants would help lead to that. Or it might be that there is a lot of like food surplus in the area, or that you can work with local farms. And again, that might be a really good way to demonstrate the need for a community kitchen. And the second thing that I think is important, no matter what type of community kitchen you're operating, is partnerships. You will not be able to do this on your own. And partnerships could be anything from who to run your kitchen with, could be getting a venue, could be around funding, it could be about getting participants. There's so many types of partnerships that will be staple to any form of community kitchen. And we will touch a little bit on that, but we have a lot more of that information online, and you can get some really great examples there too. So moving on to the first one, cookery classes. This is the bread and vegan butter of Made in Hackney. This is what we've been doing since day one. We run classes in our really beautiful kitchen you can see there on the screen called Liberty Hall. We really believe that this is a joyful space. We want people to come together, we want them in the community, and for them to learn a range of either skills, sort of knowledge, or it could be to do with a certain like topic or theme. So we don't necessarily push that it's a vegan class or a plant-based class. We might actually look more at the health and nutrition aspect of things. And health was one of the initial partnerships that we made with the local council that really helped us get our feet moving in those first years back in 2012. We also look at issues like budgeting. That's been a huge issue, as I'm sure is going to be anywhere in the globe, no matter where you are. And we do this with, classes from things like feeding your family for a certain amount of money, or how to cook on a budget, and so on. So there's a lot of different themes, as I've mentioned there. We work with a lot of volunteers. So we have a core team, which has been built up from our initial founder, up to a team of around 15 members of staff. But we couldn't do what we do without volunteers. And I would say from day one, a lot of the roles that we had around funding and finance and so on, a lot of those started off as volunteers before they slowly built to, say, someone doing something 1 day, 2 days, 5 days, and so on. So you can look at the timeline of how we've done things, which is on our website on Global Plant Kitchens, and you can maybe get a feel for what that might look like for you. But again, please don't be put off by what we've done. We've been doing this for a very long time, and it has been a journey of different ups and downs. So we've wanted to show you different examples from around not just the UK, but across the world. And this is an example from Liverpool in the north of England. So Gather at the Table is a community kitchen that has been established by one of our former by one of the former chefs and teachers at Made in Hackney, called Betty Vanda. And she moved back up to Liverpool, where she grew up, and is working on this really fantastic initiative. And one of her aspirations around social dinners is to create a really, again, joyful space. You're going to hear this word a lot in the work that we do, but a space that is, welcomes everyone, is sort of free from any sort of barriers, I suppose, for anyone to access. Really run by volunteers in the kitchen, in the garden, and so on. And it's somewhere where people can, live by that name that she's chosen, gather at the table and come together and break bread, something that's really, really important and that really can create community. So those types of social dinners, she's going to be using surplus produce, which is very common and popular in a lot of these initiatives. And again, partnerships is vital to the work that is going on in Liverpool. Another example we've got is on weekly lunches. So similar to the social dinner, but there's the way that you run it might sort of differ. The social dinner might be a bit more of a celebratory, and it might be more of an event, or it could be a bit more low key. The weekly lunches that Love Food in Exeter in the south of England have been running for several years. Um, the founder cooks alongside a handful of volunteers, and different people come together in this gorgeous space that they acquired last year. And people, have share a 1 or 2 course meal with a side, and it's a really nice way for people to get together, and it really helps them tie into other services. So they're building here. They've called it a food hub, and it hosts a community fridge, which I'm about to talk about. It also hosts events. It can be rented out. It's used as a drop-in. It's used for specific classes. So really, really to try and create that cohesion. And again, just bringing people together over food. I mentioned that Love Food run a community fridge. This is actually a fairly simple thing to set up if you're in the UK at least, because there's a charity called Hubbub, which supports the setup of community fridges. And essentially, you would just need to find a location for your community fridge and then work with them to acquire the fridge and set the sort of parameters as to how it's used. And then the sort of fridge manager or host then works with surplus food charities to get the food delivered to the fridge. And there's usually, signage, and, health and safety is very important, but it's something that can be open to anyone in the community. It's not means tested. So anyone could walk up to this fridge, open it, and take a coconut water or a lettuce. And that really is helping break down the stigma around food access, because at the end of the day, food should be there for everyone. And again, it's another way to engage with people, because you might strike up a conversation when someone's coming in for their food. So moving on to batch cooking. This is something that we do at Made in Hackney. However, this example in Peru is really enlightening and inspirational. So they are a project that runs across sort of rural and semi-rural communities across Peru, so going out into areas like you can see, um, and working with people to help veganize traditional dishes. So Peru has quite a culture of eating meat, but it's also a producer of soya. And so they're wanting to show people that the soya that's produced in their own country could be used and is super nutritious and healthy. So they're using traditional methods, they're cooking in batch, and they're working with the community kitchens that already exist. So these kitchens exist, and their teams are going in to help train and educate them on how to pivot to plant-based. And on the next slide, hopefully, a very short 10-second video of cooking soya chunks en masse should play. So as you can see, that's fairly basic, but very, very successful setup there. And, you know, I love you can hear the birds tweeting in the background. You can see what's going on. So it's very different to the way that we might do things at our kitchen in London. And then another international example here is Mensa Mensa in Rotterdam, in Holland. And they have 3 sessions a week where people can come and cook for the week, essentially. They pay €10 and then they get enough meals for the whole week. And you know, you bring your own container, you're cooking as a group, so you're feeling like a very active participant. You're getting a variety of meals, and you're going to be learning a bit about nutrition and food and technique and just getting to know people, and bringing that joy that there is around food. So those are some of the main ways that you could cook for your community and what we define as a community kitchen. We do use the term community cookery school a lot on our website because that is what we are fundamentally, but we're not saying you have to prescriptively do cooking classes. These are all different ways that you could apply the information and knowledge that we're sharing to your own setting. So, why plant-based? Why vegan? This is a question that we get asked time and time again, and it does also make the work that we do at Made in Hackney fairly niche. So, if you are not aware, a diet that is plant-based or vegan is where you would not use meat, dairy, eggs, honey, any other byproduct that has come from animals. And that might seem very prescriptive, but we're doing this because of the sort of our understanding of what is best for our own health, but the health of the planet and the well-being of animals on this earth. So what we can do is demonstrate to other people like why plant-based is a great idea. And as I said, we don't ram it down anyone's throat. We just show the sort of success through sampling the food and bringing people to a place of what they know and what they understand. Now, it's fairly common knowledge now that plant-based foods are more sort of socially, they have more of a social and environmental positive impact. The carbon emissions from beef in particular is the highest carbon emissions of anything in the planet. And you can also look at the production of dairy and so on. So there's a lot of scientific evidence available to show that if we're trying to sort of combat the climate crisis that we're currently in, that eating more plants is the best way to do that. And we do talk around a sort of whole food plant-based approach predominantly. We don't want to say that the way someone is doing plant-based is wrong. We would never say, you know, don't eat your fake sausage or whatever. We're going to lead with whole food plant-based, and we're going to show that going for the whole plant is the most healthy, nutritious option. And that we're going to be sort of demonstrating that people should eat a variety of plants, this concept of eating the rainbow, so that you can get that nutritional balance. One of the things that around health as well, we've got a lot of classes that have linked to different health organizations or initiatives. So we've done a lot of work over the years around diabetes and obesity and so on. So looking at how more plants in your diet can help combat and reduce certain illnesses. And again, if you can have evidence and make sure that's actual evidence, you're not just saying something, then that's another reason why people might want to come to your class. So you're maybe not saying it's a vegan class, but you're saying it's cooking for diabetes, for example. Catch-all, for plant-based is that it is accessible to everyone and it's culturally diverse. So there is plant-based foods in many cultures, from the Caribbean to India to Ethiopia and beyond. And it's something that, especially in somewhere like London, it means that people can be really familiar with different foods that we might be using, but it also means that there isn't a barrier to anyone being involved. Everyone can eat a plant, whereas not everyone would consume dairy, fish, or other animals. Um, Food safety is a really big thing. Most cookery projects will be vegetarian, at least from the ones that I'm most familiar with in the UK, and that's largely to do with cost and food safety. It's going to be you're not going to have the risk of things giving people food poisoning. You're not going to have things that don't last as long and that don't transport well, for example. And then, as I said, plant-based foods tend to be, especially when you're cooking fresh and like from scratch, tend to save money, and that's a way to demonstrate that budgeting aspect as well. And we have this resource, which is on our website, on the Made in Hackney website, and it's an Eat Well guide. We've actually got a diverse one as well, looking at culturally diverse foods that we've done with the Diverse Nutrition Association. But this is essentially looking at different foods, different because people might say, how do I get a balanced diet on plant-based food? And this you can demonstrate. It's the exact same as the non-plant-based in terms of how much of your proportion of veg, starchy carbs and proteins and so on. And we're just demonstrating some of the ways you can get that. So people often ask, the people in my community, they don't like plant-based food, they eat a lot of meat, there's very traditional ways of eating. And our main thing, coming back to that point about plant-based, is accessible to everyone. So you can either, stick with what people know, and give them the cuisines that they like or the flavors they like, or you could be bold and introduce them to something that they've never had before, and then therefore they're excited to try it, and they maybe don't even realize that it's plant-based. They just know that it's a delicious meal. So we also suggest about introducing new ingredients gradually. People that don't eat a lot of plants might not be used to that. So on the next point, I've talked about digestive norms. Um, Plants can cause a bit more flatulence and so on. So you want to make sure that people are aware of, getting things into their diet bit by bit. And you just want to take them on that journey. And one thing that we always think is really important is around winning people over through taste and experience. Now, people might not actually like it the first time, or it might take 2 or 3 goes. That's okay. We also don't want to say that everyone loves everything that we do all of the time, but I'd say the majority of the time people are more than pleasantly surprised. And it's not just about the food, remember, it's about the experience of cooking it or eating it or sharing that together. We have a guide to plant-based nutrition run by one of our teachers who's also a nutritionist, and that is on our YouTube channel, which we'll link to later on. And the plate well guide that I mentioned in the slide before, that is on the Made in Hackney website, and it's also it's also in the Global Plant Kitchens toolkit. And this is just a really nice visual page showing you the diversity of meals and colours, anything from like a simple soup to a more sort of chefy looking charred cauliflower to like a wholesome curry, all the different things that you can make with plants. Okay, so if you're sort of inspired to get going, how are you going to do that? And this is all information that is available in a lot more detail on Global Plant Kitchen's website. So if there's anything that we don't cover in the session, then please do have a look there. So going back to that first point that I said about your project idea, what do you want to do and why does your community need it? That will be fundamental. And you can write that out as a longer project plan. You could write it out as a mission statement. You could write it out as a vision. Um, Anyone that you're going to for funding will want to know that. And even for the people that you might want to recruit, be it volunteers or team members, or just to help you out, they're going to want to know why you're doing what you're doing. So really have a think about that. Maybe get some people from your community together to have a bit of a brainstorm around that and bounce off your ideas off of other people. And whilst we're talking about that, it's really important to define community. So who is your community? Are you just talking about a certain radius to where you're based? Are you talking about a specific council area, borough? Are you talking about people from certain cultural backgrounds or people with certain health conditions? Who is it you want to reach and why? And again, a similar question, why are you the right person to do it? Or why could the team that you create be the right team or organization to do it? And in that, you can look at what other organizations are doing too, not just what Made in Hackney does. What else exists in your community, be it plant-based or not? What exists in neighbouring communities, be it next cities, countries, so on. And figuring out, just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean you can't also do something. There's such a need for food out there that it will always be welcome. Third point here is about your team. Who can support you, be it volunteers or paid for staff, and what sort of skills do you need, what sort of experience do you need. We often get people that think that they just need a team of like die-hard vegan warriors behind them, and sadly there's not that many. So it's like, actually, I need someone who's got marketing prowess, I need someone who's a financial genius, and thinking about how are you going to get to where you want. You want the people to align with your vision for sure, but do not be too narrow-minded about what that looks like. You're going to need a space or somewhere to do your work, whether it's pop-up meal, community classes, batch cooking, or so on. So what space do you need? What could you work with? One of the organisations that we've mentored in Manchester has worked in a number of spaces, be it in a community a local community kitchen, like through the council, or in the basement of a local vegan food business, learning and adapting as she went along to understand her needs, but also meaning that she could just get off the ground and go. Because realistically, you're not going to have your own space immediately. And you might not want your own space. You might just want to pop up here and there. That is a bit more financially viable for sure. And here, thinking short term as well as long term. So where will you even try out your idea? So the penultimate thing here is good recipes. This sounds obvious, but can you write or source a recipe that is either teachable if you're doing cooking classes, scalable if you're doing batch cooking, or creating a really incredible, delicious dish if you're doing something like a social meal or cooking together? Again, coming back to that point about convincing people through taste and making sure that they understand balance and nutrition. We have a lot of recipes on the Made in Hackney website. We also have recipes in our Plant Prospects toolkit, which I'll link to next. And there's so many, online sources and resources. What I would say is never use a recipe that you haven't tested. Okay, so any recipe that you think looks great, test it and test it again. Or write your own recipes and write them down and test them. If it's something you're trying to teach other people in particular, it's really important that they are precise. And then finally on here, Global Plant Kitchens. This is the website that we have created, and it is a free 12-module program with intro videos, lots of examples, a short quiz at the end, toolkit of resources, some inspirational stories, and also an interactive map where you can find other initiatives. And also, if you have your own initiative, we would love you to submit it so that it comes up on our map, because it might be that you are a food grower in Hull and that there's actually a community kitchen in Hull and that you could connect and join and you didn't know that you existed together. And Jacqueline has put that into the chat for the Well guide. So, how to get started. These are a few steps that I've mainly covered so far. So creating a free account at www.globalplantkitchens.org. As I've mentioned, there's an online map of initiatives. We've got many videos on our YouTube at Made in Hackney, and not just the plant-based nutrition one, but there's a whole series similar to this one. Some where it's myself presenting, some where it's other people, guests, and so on. So those videos on YouTube are a really good way to explore some of the topics within the modules in a more interactive way. We have our plant prospects toolkit that doesn't only contain recipes, it also has a lot of guides on how to veganize, how to get that message out, key staples, and so on, which is a really good tool to use or adapt. And then finally, one of the things that we offer through this program is free mentoring, and that is a year-long mentoring program online, where we sort of go through a lot of the support and guidance with you. So, that's everything that I've got to say, but it would be great if anyone has any questions. Someone has said in here, I was wondering if one of the additional reasons for why plant-based could also be overall fairness, as in plant-based food allows for a fairer redistribution of food-related resources. Um, and perhaps you have included this in the idea when you mentioned social impact. Yes, this is incredible. And it's one of the things that we're trying to always educate and inform people on in terms of the global food system. And we will always sort of, pitch it to your right audience when you decide whether to sort of how deep to go on that. But absolutely. And I think people really need to understand where their food comes from, and why plants create more fairness. So how do you get onto the mentoring program? So you need to email Jacqueline, or info at globalplantkitchens.org. It's on the slide there. And what would happen is Jacqueline, who is the project manager for this, she will reach out to you, have a discussion with you, see if you are a sort of fit for the program and that we can support you appropriately, find out a bit more about your aspirations and what you're trying to do, and see if that lines up. And then if so, then you'd be assigned a mentor to work with over the next 12 months. So yeah, I'm going to draw our session to an end. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really hope that this has given you impetus to consider what would be great for your community kitchen and what would given you impetus to consider what would be great for your community and given you a bit of drive and fire to get going. So yeah, please keep in touch, and we look forward to hearing about what you get up to.